So what, feel free to come up here, I'll turn these things on. What kind of things did you guys notice during that exercise? What happened? Anyone? Do you want to come up? Oh.
One of the things that I noticed, and I kind of have a question about, is how easily that just like slips into.
Yep.
And I guess my question is, like, is the trance that we're in the trance of the class, make that more available?
Yes.
Okay. So
but let me just put a caveat on that. And there's two reasons for that, just so you get the whole picture. The first reason is because you guys have been in and out of trances a lot today, and actually over the last 2 days.
Which is similar to, like, if you've got somebody and you're bringing them in and out?
Exactly. It's like a fractionation. In fact, it is a fractionation. It's just extended over a bit of time.
Okay.
The other thing is you have a social context here that allows for people to slip into more overt trances more easily.
Okay.
Make sense? The corollary to that, though, is, and this is what we're developing here, is you're creating the kind of context where you will absolutely get very profound conversational trances. They may not be like this, but people will be like, right?
And in both cases, actually, they were like that.
Of course, here they will be because, as I said, this is the context allows for it.
Right.
A normal conversation doesn't, so it's relatively rare that will happen. We're just taking each of the pieces and we're polishing them so you're aware of how each piece feels in an ideal situation. Then when we put it together in a more live situation, you know, little bits will go wrong here and there, but overall, the tendency will still be towards trance and have the same impact. Does that make sense?
It does. And then the other thing that I noticed was the inner smile, to share that from that place with the person you're with. It's like you just fall in love with them.
Right.
You know?
I agree. And actually, saying that phrase, falling in love with them, is actually very close to the term. In the old school, hypnotic rapport, what was they used to call it? It was something like infatuation, or it was even like a seduction or seductive type term. I can't remember what the actual term was, but it shows for that great. It's a very intimate sort of feeling. Hence, I strongly recommend that if you're going to take it. I mean, we're taking right now the whole thing to an extreme, right? In normal day-to-day interactions, you'll put a little bit of that charm on, a little bit of that glamour, but not too much, because it's overwhelming for a lot of people. And if you do too much of it, some people just will feel uncomfortable because it just seems like this is weird. Every time I go there, it's like this crazy world I go into, and they can't handle it yet. Over time, you may be able to fractionate them into that experience, but you want to see how much an individual in the real world, in that context, can handle, you know, before you up the ante a little bit. And that's just part of your responsibility as, I guess, an ethical human being, that you don't push people too hard. Because if you do, by the way, then you'll go down the other road where you'll have no friends because they'll be afraid to hang out with you. And it actually happens. Erickson, as much as I admire the guy, towards the end of his days had very few friends. People were terrified of going to dinner with him because they find themselves passing the salt and pouring him some water without him ever asking it for anything, right? But he was so basically he was using these non-verbal influencing skills, but at a time, to him it was just a fun, like a prank, but he was overdoing it, and to them, they were frightened by it. So, you know, this is the other side of what you're learning to do, and you must understand that whilst it might seem tempting right now, that you'll make everyone in the world love you, and you're the best thing ever, and so on, sometimes the best thing you can do is not. Does that make sense? It's a balancing act, and sometimes you turn on a little bit, and then that's it. Sometimes you turn on a little bit more. Sometimes you don't do it at all. It's a real balancing act depending on who you are, who you're with, what the context is, and your relative needs and so on. Make sense?
It does. And then to be on the receiving end of that, I mean, there was a real gentle sweetness, and there was a little bit of, like, even in trance, a consciousness, like a choice point of, like, how much permission
Right.
am I going to give here?
Right. And that choice point is always there. Some people have learned to ignore it for whatever reasons, but it's really inside everyone's mind. Hence, you want to always treat your people with respect. You need integrity, because when you violate integrity, at some point, that choice point will go against you, as it will automatically switch against you, right? So you might get away with it once or twice, but after a while, as with Erickson, for example, the choice point switched against them, and the defense mechanisms people end up having was, I'm just not going to hang out with him anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Well, I was working with my exercise partner, and I described my experience to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he smiled and looked in my eyes, and all of a sudden his eyes seemed very wide to me,
Mm-hmm.
and fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt myself going into a trance, and my eyes closed, and as I exhaled, he said, "That's right."
Mm-hmm.
And as he did that, I went into this expansive space that was all pink and blue lights,
Mm-hmm.
diffuse light, not glaring,
Mm-hmm.
but very pleasant, and it felt like a huge space. And momentarily, all the voices in the room went away.
Welcome to Hypnoland. What have we got here? We've got a visual hallucination. We've got a negative auditory hallucination, right? And this is just a normal conversation. It's just part of normal everyday interactions, folks. It happens. It's just people don't ascribe the same meaning to them when it happens normally. But thank you. That's an awesome, awesome experience I've had, isn't it? By the way, who here wants to know how to be able to achieve that within just a regular induction by saying almost actually very little? Anyone? Yeah? All right. Well, day 4 or 5, I believe, will be coming on to that. So you better pay attention. Yes.
Well, Natalie had a physical experience in that she experienced warm energy running down both of her arms.
Right.
I hadn't heard that yet. I mean, she felt it in my presence again, just
Right.
relating it. So I thought that was extremely interesting. And
Oh, the thing that I find particularly interesting, apart from the little boogie I'm about to make for the phone, is the fact that you have now become associated with that experience enough that just by telling you about it, the experience happens again. Isn't that interesting how that works? Because now he's part of that whole conglomeration, so by talking about it, it re-engages the same pattern, the same mechanism, and again, out comes that sort of energy type feeling. Awesome, thank you.
I had a new experience with this one too, that, or maybe I'm just first aware of it. Mine involved going back to a time when I was riding horses, and I was aware of the noise, but soon I realized the noise kind of was taken up by the sound of horses' hooves, and,
Right.
and the horses huffing and puffing as we're
So the noise
cantering,
switched a meaning in your mind and became something else.
it became it was part of it, but it became, and that's the first time I've noticed something like
Do you
that.
guys see how flexible the mind is? Everything you think is real. I'm sorry to tell you guys, it's like the blue pill from the Matrix. Everything you think is real is not. It is a hallucination generated by your brain, right? If for no other reason, think about it. Your senses, sight, sound, touch, and so on, they're basically converted to electrochemical signals to come up through your nervous system and so on. It's electricity or chemistry, depending on which point of the spiral you look at, right? Then it hits your brain, and your brain has to make meaning out of all of this and give you something, an experience, that allows you to navigate through the world and survive and reproduce and do whatever people do. Make sense? But it isn't real. If ever you've seen an optical illusion, it's something that tricks your brain to see something that's not there, and that's one of the reasons we can't quite figure it out. We know it's not real, and yet somehow it still works. Does that kind of make sense? Hypnosis allows you to create different realities. Now we're getting to some really kind of trippy stuff here, because it really is. It allows you to do the kind of things that other people go to jail for, and not even risk that, because it's all produced inside the brain anyway. Does that make sense? Which also means you have a great responsibility. You don't just mess around with people's realities just for the hell of it. You're doing it in a way that's ethical. In other words, in a way that is a genuine force for good for those individuals, in a way that frees them up to be a better human being, to achieve more things and so on. And if along the way you happen to get something of what you want as well, it's a win-win as far as I'm concerned. Everyone gets something positive. But that's where your integrity and your ethics is really important, because you're walking around in someone else's mind, and there is a responsibility that comes with that. Does that make sense? Do you want to come up for that? But do you like this so far? Who here realizes that you're not even at the end of day 2 yet? Isn't that something? Go ahead.
My question is if you're, my ultimate goal is the same thing that you were just talking about, H+ essentially. What if freeing them up and giving them more choice actually destroys whatever their secondary gain was for having been limited?
Yeah, then that's something that you need to give them a choice for, and you can give the unconscious mind a choice before that happens, because it's like saying, should people know what happened to them in their past? Well, that's really up to them, because some things they can't handle yet, and if you start freaking them out and causing out reactions and so on, that's not very healthy for them. If they've asked for it, they just don't know how to get through it, I see no problem with that, right? They've asked to go that step further, they're trying, they just don't know the way around it. That's a very different scenario to people just happily going on with their lives, and then suddenly life explodes in their face and they go, oh, I don't think I want to live in this world, right? Because they might not emotionally be able to cope with that yet. You can, of course, massage things along a little bit by preparing someone to be ready for a bigger world, so to speak. But then it still takes them to a choice point where they decide, I now feel safe inside myself, safe enough that when I see or feel or experience the limits of the world I've built around myself, that I feel constrained by it and now I wish to get beyond it, right? But you can't push them outside those boundaries, because then you are doing, in my opinion, you're doing quite a bit of violating in terms of their own mental experience.
Agreed. Two things. Number one is it conscious? You said they make a choice. Sometimes when I'm watching people's body language, oftentimes they'll go no.
Yeah.
Which means their unconscious mind is saying, yes, I'm willing to make a choice, but
Yes.
the conscious part of me is not willing to make that same choice.
Yes. And you'll get the reverse as well. When people say you're ready to change, they go, of course, right?
Yeah.
You'll get both. And again, don't stick with head nods and head shakes as
being
expressed
yeah,
meaning.
yeah.
A little bit of testing around those areas will be as well. So take everything as an indication, and then test it a little bit. But yes, you absolutely get that. And usually I'll go with the unconscious response. It knows
Generally.
best, because it's the one that's kept them safe their entire life and will continue to do so.
And you're going to show us how to do the testing and all the rest of that. This sort of slow movement into those areas.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I need you guys to basically keep your eyes open in terms of the calibration and stuff like that. When there is a dramatic shift, either they'll increase tension or decrease tension, or stress response to it. It's not all about tension. Sometimes it's about stillness and so on, right? But then again, stillness is not the only thing. For example, when people go into trance, they tend to have less movement. Now, do I look particularly stressed right now? Hopefully the answer would be no, right? As opposed to, as I'm moving around as well, let's say that we're talking about something that is somehow psychologically threatening to me. Now, I'm still moving less, but there's a different quality to it. Can you see that? Those are the things you pay attention to. And if you're not sure, you reintroduce the same idea again, and if you get the same result again, after 2 or 3 times, it's like, all right, I get it, I'm sorry, let's leave that one alone for a while. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
In fact, I know one hypnotist, the aforementioned Dave Dobson, who has now passed away, sadly, who, that's how we judge whether or not he would work with a client. They'd come in for a session, he'd say, are you ready to make this change that you've come here for? And I mean, he'd check them out ahead of time, talk about things that they agree with and disagree with to get unconscious head, yes and no signals and so on. And let's say the head nod was a yes and the shake was a no. It doesn't have to be. But let's say that was what it was. And they'd go, you ready to make this change? And go, sure, absolutely, right? Or they go, yes. You can kind of hear the little catch, right? So he goes, great, well, I have a sense that you'll really enjoy the marina. If you walk down this road for like half an hour and so the boats and so on, just go and hang around there for the next hour or two and then come on back and we'll have a chat, right? And I'll come back and consciously they're totally confused, right? Because they think they've just said, yes, I'm ready to change, and you send them off to watch the boats, what the hell, right? Then you come back and they'd say, are you absolutely ready to change right now? And I'll go, yes. He goes, oh, by the way, have you seen the flower garden over in this direction? You might do 2 or 3 times. Eventually, they'll come back, and of course, things are happening at the unconscious level right now. The unconscious mind is here. They're here for the reason. So it's percolating stuff. We're talking more about therapy right now. And eventually, they come back and go, you ready to make this change, son? And go, yes, already. He goes, oh, good. Come on inside. Let's have a chat.
Got it.
Right?
Got it, yeah.
So does that answer your question about testing?
Yes.
It's actually, thank you. It's actually very straightforward. And by the way, do you see the congruity in his response? Right? That's how you test. It's actually a lot easier than it sounds. Hence, we're not going to be spending too much time on it. But if your filters are closed, you can't test. It's as simple as that.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yes.
Good.
Can I get to my second thing?
Oh,
it's
cool,
real quick.
sure.
It's quick. It's quick. It's easy.
Absolutely.
That's right. When you're saying that to the person, this works conversationally.
No. Well, yes and no. If you're doing it conversationally, then you're moving, in my opinion, to an area called, what I would call semi-covert hypnosis. In other words, people know you're doing something, is that they can't figure out what it is.
Got it.
Right? If they know you're a hypnotist, they'll probably have figured out that you're hypnotizing them somehow. It's just they don't know what you're doing, so there's nothing they can resist. Make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
So it would take you out of the covert category because, well, people know that you're up to something, even if they can't quite figure out what that up to something is. If you try to do it totally covertly, then you just come off a little odd, because why is this guy going that's right constantly? That doesn't make sense. If you're doing it on purpose, of course, and you are fine with them realizing that something is sort of up, then that adds fuel to the mill. It becomes a frame, like something's happening, only I'm talking to your unconscious, not your conscious. And when we get to the conscious and conscious dissociation, that on its own can have a profound hypnotic
So it
effect.
changes the context.
It'll change the context significantly.
Okay. Is there a classification of that type of that's right that works conversationally? Because I
How
know
do you
that's like instead of saying like you notice.
Oh, you mean like saying okay? So
you see
as I'm
something.
talking to you about your holiday, okay, and then you're like okay, and
Well, you just see that. Yeah, you see an unconscious response to something you are doing with them conversationally. You don't have to say that's right because it's going to move them less covert.
if you want one of those things, the simplest thing you can do is to mirror the nonverbal trance response. Right?
Okay.
Let's say the thing you'd be saying that's right is that they're blinking more often, right?
So you just blink more
So you'll talk, and as soon as they start blinking more often, you'll talk about I was tying my shoelace and it was a great day, because I don't know, I just figured out how to tie my shoelace for the first time, and then maybe they'll take a breath in and you'll smile and go, and it took me forever just to figure out how to tie a shoelace. I don't know why. I mean, I was maybe a bit slow as a kid. Who knows?
So you're communicating on the nonverbal
Exactly.
channel.
You're reinforcing what they're doing that's moving them towards trance.
Awesome. Thank
Make
you.
sense? You're welcome. These are great questions, guys. Thank you. Yeah, give me a round of applause. These are awesome questions. You want to come up? Or come on this side if you want. Or that side. Who knows?
Hey, Igor. It occurs to me, looking back on stuff, I've conversationally done like revivification, but I did it for things that were unintentionally. I did this
For more negative things?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I wound up getting a total.
Have you ever heard of the term a pity fest?
Yeah.
That is called a revivification by lots of very good hypnotists who are both in lots of H minus, because they're going like, oh, my life sucks. Your life sucks too. Tell me about how much it's like, yeah, I had that happen to me too when that happened to. So they're constantly sucking each other down to a negative thing. They're reinforcing the negative experiences. In some families, you'll get a lot of these loops happening where people are reinforcing, you see, you failed, and here's another example of how you failed, and here's another example of how you failed. So they're revivifying failure. Not intentionally, not out of desire to harm, just I guess the best phrase would be out of ignorance, because they don't realize that the harm that's doing. Their intention is good in the sense that they want to protect, say, their child from making a mistake by reaching too high, say, right? And they're warning them like, that'll go wrong or something. And then, of course, they're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy by revivifying, putting their attention more and more on failure, so that's the cycle that gets reinforced and so on. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
But now, of course, as a great hypnotist, you have the power to change all that, do you not?
Definitely.
Oh, come on, guys, let's try this again. You have the power to change all this, right? That's much better. You guys, you're worrying me there for a moment. Okay. To answer.
Here's my question: how would you deal?
Let's just pay attention here, guys, please.
How would one deal with, say, like an accidental abreaction? I mean, like in terms of, say, all of a sudden, say I'm talking about like a thing that may have happened, say, I don't know, like street fight or something along those lines, and someone's like listening to my story and they're envisioning a moment where they may have experienced a thing.
Ask
and
me again
then-
after the break because we'll need to do a couple of processes before I can answer that question properly.
Cool.
Okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So basically, you're saying my father and stepmother were great hypnotists
Yes.
when they told me repeatedly about the things we did when I was with them, and my mother would get upset because I could never remember the things that I did with her that were fun, because they kept.
They created they basically created a memory block on the fun experiences and a hyperamnesia of the not so fun experiences, if I understand you correctly. And a lot of parents are very good hypnotists. Some, the people who are fortunate have very positive hypnotists in their life, they're a force for good. But let's face it, in some families, the hypnotists aren't the most eloquent with the way that they enforce or reinforce positive characteristics. And that's where a lot of anyone here a hypnotherapist? Right? That's where you get your income from. Right?
Yep.
Undoing the work of the accidentally negative hypnotist. Right? Hence, the more people know about this stuff, the less likely it is that we'll need a job. Sorry guys, our job is to put ourselves out of action.